Hey, what's going on, guys? TheHORRORman back with my top 10 personal favorite movies of all time. I've been wanting to do this video for a while, and I think about it often, but it's been so damn hard to narrow it down to 10. I've done a top 20 favorite horror movies list in the past, and that's one I probably need to revisit. But the movies on this list will all be non-horror. Sure, some of them may have horror elements, but none of the films in this top 10 are traditional horror films. If that's what you're interested in seeing, well, stay tuned. I'm sure I'll revisit that list sooner than later and do a new, maybe, top 10 of my favorite horror films ever made. But for now, this will just be my top 10 personal favorite non-horror movies. In addition, I've also elected not to include any Christmas films, because I will probably do a separate ranking for those as well, later on in the year. Interestingly, a lot of these films contain Christmas scenes, but they are not specifically Christmas movies. As I go through each of the films on this list, I'll be showing VHS tapes, DVDs, Blu-rays, and even a limited edition 4K Blu-ray combo pack. Like any other ranking of mine, this one is likely to change, whether it be next year, next month, or even next week. It's also important to keep in mind, as always, this is just my personal opinion. I am not claiming these 10 movies are the best films ever made, although that might be the case with some of them. These are just my personal favorites. So, here we go. My top 10 personal favorite non-horror and non-Christmas movies. Coming in at number 10 is a movie that should probably be higher. The Shawshank Redemption. Many people consider this to be the greatest film ever made, objectively, and I might agree with that. It's an absolutely brilliant film with one of my all-time favorite endings. With that being said, it's not necessarily a good background movie. You really have to dedicate your time and attention while watching this one to truly appreciate it. It's an emotional journey, an experience in itself. But for now, it's number 10 in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Coming in at number 9 is Rocky, the original. I almost considered including Rocky Balboa instead. I should probably mention I've decided to only feature one film per franchise as I do this ranking. I think that's only fair, because one trilogy might have included 2 or even 3 films if I didn't make that rule. And I think you'll figure out which one I'm talking about when I get to it. Rocky is a classic. Not just a classic sports film, but a classic film in general. And it still holds up to this day. It's not just a movie about boxing. It's a movie about living. This, like The Shawshank Redemption, is another film I not only consider to be one of my personal favorites, but I also consider it to be one of the greatest movies ever made. At number 8 is a movie that probably wouldn't be on a lot of people's top 10, but it's certainly on mine. Fast Times at Ridgemont High. This, apparently, is my all-time favorite comedy film, since it's the only traditional comedy on this list. There is something so nostalgic about Fast Times for me, and it's a movie I can watch over and over again and never get tired of it. Not to mention, it has the #1 most paused scene of all time, and understandably so. Fast Times at Ridgemont High is also one of the most quotable movies for me, and those who know me well know that to be true. Coming in at number 7 is Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. This top 10 list would not have felt complete without a Star Wars film. And The Rise of Skywalker is my favorite movie in the saga. I've described The Rise of Skywalker as a Star Wars film for Star Wars fans. For me, it's the ultimate Star War. I guess that's grammatically correct. It might be interesting to some of you that I chose this one, since it is a newer movie, and the newest of all the Star Wars films. But, like I said, this is just my personal opinion and my favorite of the franchise. I do wish I could rank this one higher, though. And at number 6 is a movie I usually do rank higher. This has been as high as my number 3 favorite movie of all time. Harold and Maude. Why is it at number 6 right now? Who knows? You guys know how it goes. This movie has a lot of horror elements, but it's also uplifting, inspiring, and downright depressing. It's a movie about death and a movie about life. Plus, the Cat Stevens soundtrack is phenomenal. Harold and Maude is one of those movies I say, don't knock it unless you've watched it. It's probably not what you expect it to be. It's without a doubt one of my favorite movies ever made, and it lands here at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is Goodfellas. Rest in peace to Ray Liotta. This, for me, is a perfect background movie, and it's a film I have on a lot. Whenever it comes on TV, I just can't turn it off. This is yet another quotable film, and as a fan of The Sopranos, that series owes a lot to this movie. Martin Scorsese is one of my favorite directors, and Goodfellas is my favorite film from him. It also happens to be one of my son's favorite movies. As a matter of fact, I believe this is his number 1. But for me, it's number 5. Coming in at number 4 is the movie that for most of my life I considered my number 1 favorite movie of all time. Edward Scissorhands. Up until just a few years ago, this still would have been number 1. I've always loved this movie. It may also be the film on this list that I've watched the most throughout my life. I used to play this and Beetlejuice back to back. And Beetlejuice, by the way, is not in this top 10 because I did consider it to be more of a horror film, despite being a horror comedy. If not for that stipulation, Beetlejuice would have also made this top 10. Edward Scissorhands is now number 4, dropping down from what once was number 1. But it's not because I like it any less. It's simply because I love my top 3 even more. Coming in at number 3 is probably the movie, gun to my head, no pun intended, I would say is the greatest film ever made. The Godfather. What can I say? I'm Italian. Goodfellas and The Godfather were bound to be on this list. I know many would probably rank The Godfather Part 2 higher than this one, but not me. I've always preferred the original. With that being said, as I mentioned earlier in this video, if I did not make the rule of only including one film per franchise, I'd probably have featured all 3 The Godfather films on this list. Yes, even The Godfather Part 3. I love it. The original is my favorite of the trilogy, though, and it ranks here as my number 3 favorite movie of all time. In second place, my number 2 personal favorite movie of all time, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Admittedly, I had only seen this film for the first time over the last month or 2. But since first watching it with Jason, I've now seen it 7 or 8 times. I loved it so much, I had to immediately buy this expensive but extremely awesome limited edition. I cannot get enough of this movie. I absolutely love it. I love everything about it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is the first film in a long time to make me proud to be a fan of cinema. There are so many movies that come and go and don't really leave an impact, but this one sure did. I've wanted to review this film so many times, but I literally feel like I just wouldn't be able to do it justice. There is so much I'd want to describe in detail, but I just haven't done it. I feel that no matter what I say about it, it wouldn't be enough. Take that as you will. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is my second favorite movie of all time. Which brings us to my number 1 favorite movie of all time, Kenny and Company. I've talked about Kenny and Company so many times now. It's a movie that makes me feel a way no other movie makes me feel. It's set in the 70s and was released in 1976, on the days leading up to Halloween. There's no real storyline. It's just a couple of friends growing up. It's the ultimate coming-of-age story. The movie is bursting with nostalgia. It cannot be contained. It makes you feel young while watching it. You're able to somehow relive that innocence of your youth. Kenny and Company was also Don Coscarelli's inspiration to make Phantasm, my favorite horror film of all time. Go figure. My favorite horror movie of all time was greatly influenced by my #1 favorite movie of all time. It's a shame that Kenny and Company is so rare, because I highly recommend this movie to anyone who was ever a kid. Yes, all of us. I can best describe this movie as a timeless time capsule, if that makes sense. For me, there's really no denying it. As much as I love the other 9 movies on this list, Kenny and Company is my all-time favorite movie. So, there you have it, guys. My top 10 personal favorite non-horror and non-Christmas movies of all time. What do you think? Comment below and let me know. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit that thumbs up and be kind. Subscribe.